You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the E-Marketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Today I'm joined by Stephen Silvers of Neustar. We're going to talk about data and the power of data and the importance of data. So my recollection is you were at Aggregate Knowledge before they were acquired by Neustar. So what was the sort of product roadmap change that occurred? Obviously, there was something Neustar wanted pretty badly to do the acquisition, but at the same time, they were bringing some of their own assets to the table. So how did the product roadmap and your role change after the acquisition?
So back at Aggregate Knowledge, we had this sort of meta ad server product that would, kind of sit in your ad server and measure audiences and audience effectiveness. And that was a great feature, but it wasn't really a full product. And Neustar had been acquiring assets in the marketing space over the previous couple of years. And so we were the third of maybe four key acquisitions that we made in the marketing space. So before they bought Aggregate Knowledge, they bought a company called Quova, which had this IP intelligence product. They bought a company called Targus Info, which had this deep identity asset for marketing purposes. And so when we got acquired, the first thing that we had to do was sort of figure out how to combine those assets into a cohesive whole. And so we combined the identity assets from Targus Info, the measurement capability of Aggregate Knowledge, and the onboarding capability of Targus Info, and the IP intelligence into a product which we now call Unified Identity. And we took that, and that's the basis of Fabric, which is the connectivity platform that Neustar which has all the little hooks into the ecosystem and the identity assets to power all of our solutions. And then we bought a company called MarketShare a couple of years afterwards, and we took their MTA product and built it on top of that platform. And now that's part of the unified analytics solution that we offer, which is a combination of multi-touch attribution and media mix modeling. And so over the years, my role has kind of gone from more of a bit player to being responsible for the overall platform and the ecosystem as a whole. And so it's been really interesting to see how that's evolved and how the company's evolved. And it's been a really interesting ride for me because I've learned so much about how the industry works. I mean, I never worked in advertising before I started Aggregate Knowledge, and now I got pretty deep into how everything works, and I never thought I'd be doing this for as long as I have been. But it's just such an interesting space, and we get disrupted. Like, I don't know, every couple of weeks, Apple or Google will make an announcement, and we get regulations that come in, and so it's always new and fresh. Like, we're never bored. And so it's been an interesting ride, and we continue to have to innovate to stay ahead of these disruptions.
So when your sales team's out there, are they sort of selling the unified identity platform a la carte, or are they selling it as part of a whole? And then if they are selling it a la carte, how are they sort of pitching it as differentiated from all the other new identity graph and identity management platforms?
So the idea with unified identity was that we had two separate product lines. We had the customer experience product line, which I'm responsible for, and we had this customer intelligence product line that one of my peers was responsible for. And what we found was that the sales team had to do this weird dance at the beginning of every engagement, trying to figure out, well, what kind of identity is it that you're trying to buy? And we found that marketers aren't really thinking about things that way. And they say they want identity. They want identity. They don't want digital identity or offline identity. And so we found that to be a challenge for our sales team. So the idea with unified identity is that we could sell a holistic identity solution, and then you could sort of pick and choose the pieces you wanted. So if when you say identity, it means, you want data appends, well, that's great. It's in the package if you want it. If that means you also want a cross-device graph, great. It's in the package. You can just kind of check the box. And so what we found is that it's a lot easier for marketers to kind of engage with Neustar now that we have this offering. And we've actually ended up finding that it's quite differentiated, because most companies either have an offline identity solution or they have an online identity solution. And we're really the only one that's selling that as a whole. And so what we found is that you add a lot of efficiency in if you're using the same sort of true set in your offline and your online identity space. And so it increases efficiencies because you don't have a match rate problem, right? If you, in the old days, you would go and you'd buy your offline identity from one place. Then when you went to translate it to online, you lose a lot of scale and accuracy when you did the transition. And when you buy both in the same space, you don't have that. And so you don't lose that efficiency right off the bat. And so that obviously increases your ROI over time.
Cool. That sort of brings me to my next question, which is data collaboration and data clean rooms. Obviously, if you're going to start commingling data together, you probably need some way of collaborating. Maybe you need a clean room, maybe you don't. So what percentage of clients are doing that, or sort of bought into this idea of a data clean room, or finding ways to collaborate with the data together? Well,
so there are a variety of different collaboration technologies that we offer, and you can call them clean rooms if you like. And so for years we've had a product called the Data Science Development Kit, which is a pseudonymized data lake that we build for clients. And we take their data, we pseudonymize it, we put it in there. We take our data, we pseudonymize it, we put it in there. We take second and third party data, we pseudonymize it, we put it in there. And then clients use that data for a variety of different use cases. Some of them have their own measurement use cases. Frankly, that's the basis for, the way that we build our MTA solution is on top of that sort of pseudonymized data lake. So some of our clients want to build their own models. They're building their own MTA on top of that. We have a lot of clients taking their onboarded data, sticking it in there, combining it with digital assets and doing a whole bunch of modeling. And so that, for years, that's been great and enough. And for some clients, it still is. But what we're finding is there's a trend that a lot of people, they want the value of data collaboration, but they don't really want their data to move very much. Because what we've seen here is every time your data moves, there's a risk of breach. And I'm not talking about SolarWinds or any of those things. I mean, there are hackers out there doing this on purpose, but the vast majority of breaches that we're seeing are really just human error. Someone puts data on a data share somewhere and forgets to, require authentication, or forgets to encrypt the data. Cambridge Analytica is a great example of a data set that was just sitting out there on a share. And so we see that more and more, our clients are concerned about their data moving. And so they're looking more towards, software clean rooms that allow collaboration without having the data move around as much. And so that's where we see the industry going. But, people aren't necessarily asking for that yet unless they've had a breach. And so we're not seeing it, it's kind of slow at this point. Like, we know it's necessary. And so we're building that out because we see the writing on the wall there. But most of our clients are still doing collaboration the old way, which is taking all the data and putting it in a single place and then, running analytics on top of that. And we see that, that's going to continue for several years until these clean rooms can really do more than intersections. Because if you look at all the software clean rooms out there, they're really built around audience targeting. And so all they can do is well, this is the intersection between these two audiences, and poof, now there's a syndication or there's a data append, and that's it. And that's not really going to meet the bar for what the industry is going to need for real data collaboration, because you're going to need to be able to measure the effectiveness of what you're doing so that you can have real ROIs, so you can justify the money you're spending. And those intersections aren't going to be enough. So we're really focused on a technology that we call vertically integrated federated learning, or VIFL. And that technology is going to allow for more interesting analytics on top of data. And we think that, given, the way that we've, been sort of the leaders in the space in unified analytics, and we think that's kind of our differentiated approach to software clean rooms. And we think that's going to be a real differentiator for us in the industry as it evolves. But again, it's still really early days, and I don't know that anyone really knows what a clean room is going to do, when they're needed. But that's where we're focused, if that makes sense.
Cool. Well, you just had me thinking about the fact that in online, typically data sets they used to revolve around a cookie ID, and then they're starting to revolve around, the email address or the phone number is the hashable unique identifier. But once you start pulling in external third-party data or first-party data into the data lake or the clean room or whatever you want to call it, what do you index around, right? Because sometimes all you have is postal data and maybe first name, last name. And then on top of that, you've got one record that says Robert and another record that says Bob, right? And so is sort of the AI, or is there sort of a emerging algorithm that takes its best guess when it starts to see, a record that looks, 88% the same, right? Is it the same household, or is it the same person?
So there are a couple things in there. So I'm going to answer your question in a couple parts. So when you're talking about digital data, we are talking, about these IDs. We have one, the Fabric ID, that's based off of an email or a phone number or an IP address. We've got other IDs that are based off of email, one type of ID. But one of the big challenges that we're going to have is that, number one, not that many people log into most of these digital properties, and even the most optimistic number that we've heard, which comes from LiveRamp, is they think 30% of users will log in. So that's obviously not a great number. Because it's way less than 100. And so we're going to need other things to take that 70% of users and put them in a clean room and make them effective. And so one of the things that we're working on is using the overlap of the identified signal with other signal like contextual or first-party behavioral, so that we can do some lookalike modeling and expand the reach of that overlap. Because even if you get 30%, we think that's a little high. We're still going to need to expand that. So that's thing number one. So look at the IAB's contextual taxonomy as an example of something standard that we can use across sites and across domains to grow the reach of the overlap of those emails and phone numbers. And that's going to be a crucial part of how we operate in any sort of data collaboration or clean room environment, because otherwise we're just not going to be able to get the scale. But that doesn't even take into account the fact that most people, they may not log in with the same email address for every website they go into. And I know that most people I know have at least 3 email addresses. They have their work email, they have their good personal email address that they give to their friends and their mom, and then they have their less good email that they don't check as much, that they sign up for newsletters and whatnot. I'm always the worst case. So I create a different email address for every website that I go to, because I've been doing that since I was like 20. And so before I got into ad tech, it's just a habit. So I'm the worst case. But the point is that you need some sort of identity resolution help when you're doing data collaboration, because if one party has my personal email address and the other one has my work email, or maybe they have my phone number because I gave them my phone number, like those things, if you're using just a straight ID, they're not going to match, right? And so even if you have the same users, if you don't have some identity resolution to help you figure out, well, these people are the same people, then your match rate is going to suck, and that's going to really affect your ability to collaborate. And so whether it's Bob versus Robert, or my work email versus my phone number versus my personal email, it's all kind of the same problem, right? And so we have one of the things that we have is our unified identity solution, which you can stick into our clean room, or frankly stick into any clean room, and you can use that to sort of juice the match. And so we have a lot of clients doing that today. We have a lot of CDP partnerships and clean room partnerships to include that type of identity resolution service in the software to help juice that match. And you are going to need that, right? Because the quality of your collaboration, is baseline the match rate between the two parties. And then if you've got multiple parties like that, obviously it's going to make it even harder because the Venn diagram between those things is small, right? And when we think about it, depending on the industry, a lot of times you're going to need at least 3 or 4 different partners in a data collaboration case to really get good results. So you can imagine even the simplest case where you're a direct-to-consumer brand and you have your own data and you're small. What are you doing? You're buying on Google, you're buying on Facebook. So you still need to do a 3-way match there to really get a good view of your buy. And that's the simplest case, right? And so we imagine that these could get quite complex, particularly in cases where the marketer doesn't own the sales data. So if you're a fast-moving consumer goods company, you buy across 10 or 15 big platforms, and then your sales data, you don't have that comes from someone else, and maybe they don't want to give you that raw data. So then you have to use some sort of software-based clean room technology to do the intersection between these things. And it's going to get even more complicated as we see so many people move into the clean room space. And you're probably not going to be able to dictate what clean room you're using in every situation, right? If you're buying from Google, they have their clean room called ADH, and you're going to have to use that. And then, some folks might use Neustar, some folks might use InfoSum or Carl's Gate or End Party. There's a million folks out in space. And so, when you're trying to actually assemble your solution, it's going to have to walk through all of those different clean rooms and then sort of pull everything together and make sense of the result. And so it may end up being quite complicated. And so we really need some standards in that space to sort of help us out. And so we're looking for the industry to do that, but it's still just too early days for anyone to really have. I mean, if you look, there's 10 different things called the clean room, and they all operate very differently. It's like the CDP space 3 years ago. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. So it's going to be confusing for a little while.
You just mentioned standards, and that reminds me that you've been pretty active within the industry and organizations for a while, from the IAB Tech Lab to ICOM Global, and now you got the 3 Marketing Council. Are these all sort of similarly focused on standards, or do they have different missions with regards to that? Or is that just sort of you keeping tabs on the industry that caused you to do that?
It's a little bit of both. 3 Marketing Council is really all about privacy and effective and ethical marketing. So that's really us, and me trying to make sure that we take the industry in the right direction, just so that the industry continues to be successful. ICOM Global is more of an analytics organization, and so there are standards in there. There's the Ethics Council, which I'm part of, That's really more about better analytics and marketing. The Tech Lab is a standards organization, and I'm really passionate about my involvement there. I think that the work that they're doing, that we're doing, is really crucial to the success of the industry, because we need technical standards in order to operate consistently and transparently. And the work that they've done so far has really increased the effectiveness and the transparency in the supply chain, and we expect that to continue. And so the standards they've had around identity with rearc, and now the seller defined audiences, are things that are really going to help us, kind of succeed in a world without cookies. And the more that we can agree on standards, the easier that's going to be.
So yeah, it's one of the rare situations with regards to the erosion of the third-party cookie where the marketer and publisher are both upset about it. Obviously, Safari, it's been gone for a while, and Firefox, it's been gone for a while. But Chrome is the big scary next move. I guess the big fear that everybody has is obviously the marketer wants the level of targeting. And if they lose that, then they're not willing to pay as much, which is why the publishers are flipping out, because they're like, but wait, Steve Silvers is actually super valuable. You just don't know, right? That he is until you're not willing to pay the price that he's worth. And so do you see sort of this as the identity graphs and the various solutions the industry is putting forward? Do you think that they'll be sort of be able to avert the sort of Armageddon of untargeted audiences? Will a combination of context and identity, to the extent that we can get it, replace what we've got now, or is there really going to be a sort of a ripple effect of yield and targetability?
So I think that the biggest mistake that we make is to pretend that what we have today is perfect. It's not perfect. It doesn't work that well in any browser other than Chrome, and even in Chrome, it doesn't work great. The cookie was always a hack. It was a convenient hack, and it's enabled a lot of good things and bad things. But it's not like we have a perfect solution that we're losing. We have a jury-rigged solution that we're losing, and we're replacing it with, because we've had the time, we're replacing it with some solutions which have the opportunity to be better architected than what we had in the past. So I think that from that perspective, the biggest mistake that marketers can make is lament what they're losing. I think, and we hear a lot of people say, well, that's not what we have today, and so that's not good. And the thing to remember is that these changes really affect everyone equally. And so comparing yourself to what you have now or what you had 3 years ago is, is as effective as, or is as useful as remembering how athletic you were in high school, right? Because that's not coming back, right? We're not going back to high school, and we're not going back to the days where the third-party cookie was a universal ID. And so what you have to do is you have to compare yourself to the other competitors in the space when these changes happen. And all you have to do is be better than your competitor, right? You don't have to be better than you were 3 years ago, or even as good as you were 3 years ago. You have to be better than your competition now. And so with that in mind, the more that you embrace the changes and you're ready for the disruption, the better off you're going to be. So, in general, what we're finding is that there'll be people who have their heads in the sand, and they are the losers when these changes happen. And then you have people that are proactively testing stuff, figuring out what works, what doesn't work, putting their data strategy in place, putting their data governance in place. We know where everything's going. We have a couple more years, which is great. That gives us time to put our strategies in place. But a lot of people are taking this wait and see approach, and to some extent, I think they're the ones that are going to lose, because they're not going to be as facile with these new technologies and as prepared. Now, that said, almost all the focus that we see is on targeting, right? And so you're asking, is targeting going to continue to work? I think it's in everyone's best interest for targeting to continue to work. The brands need to spend money on media. The publishers need to sell their media. Like everyone needs for that to work. Where we're seeing the lack is in measurement. And you'll hear me, I bring this up a lot. I'm not responsible for the measurement at Neustar, but measurement and focus on measurement is kind of our, it's our special sauce. It's what makes Neustar different. And so that's where we're focused on kind of filling those holes, because at the end of the day, we believe that helping brands justify the ROI for the spend is going to be crucial to make sure that all those dollars continue to flow. Because if the brands can't show that their spending is effective, at some point the CFO is going to say no. And so that's where we're focused, and that's all you'll hear us talk about it all the time. All of our solutions, yes, they do targeting, but we don't do targeting without measurement. Because if you can't measure the effectiveness, then how do you know? How do you know that you're even doing good targeting? Like, you don't. And so all of our solutions have a measurement slant to them, and you'll see that continue throughout the next 2 years as we develop our technologies. Given the reprieve that we got from Chrome.
So it's interesting, in the online space, there are a few platforms and channels that are continuing to sort of have, just due to the shrink wrap that they come with, or user login, whether it's CTV or over-the-top TV or addressable TV, where you'll still have household level targeting, or potentially even better than household level targeting. Do you think they'll be beneficiaries of the sort of uncertainty with regards to being able to target through other channels?
So we've obviously seen a lot of movement into that space for a variety of reasons. More smart devices, more streaming consumption. That is obviously the hot space right now. It's hard to tell whether that's the hot space because that's where the eyeballs are, because we feel that addressability is going to remain there. I mean, we've certainly seen, Apple make some announcements about their next version of iOS that is going to start obfuscating the IP address in some of these calls. And I do think that is going to affect the addressability of OTT over time, not because the addressability of OTT itself will be affected, but, you need to be able to connect the data you have to the data you want to buy. And if the IP addresses are all obfuscated, then that's obviously going to affect your ability to do that. And then if you're trying to drive something like an app install, it's going to be hard to measure the effectiveness of it. And so that is going to be a problem. And so I think that there's a little bit of denial on the OTT side that is coming. So we are going to need to have the same solutions that we're putting in place in display and in mobile for OTT, but they have a little more time to do it. And so I think, when you look at that, when you look at the folks in the CTV space, a lot of these folks do get logins, and obviously those folks are going to continue to be successful. But the haves and have-nots continue to be around logins, and I think that's true in the podcasting space and in the audio streaming space as well. I think those things are, that space is also growing very fast and has all the same advantages and disadvantages of CTV, and so we see that as a trend. But we do we expect to see dollars being spent there, because that's just how people are spending their time. I spend more time watching streaming video and listening to streaming audio than I do browsing the web now, and I'm an old man. So I mean, my kids don't read anything. So that's definitely where the future of eyeballs is going to be. So we definitely see that trend continuing into the future.
So one thing we did at my day job over the last few years is we acquired a few direct mail companies, and they were all sort of the individualized pieces of mail are all unique and the ability to hyper personalize. And of course, snail mail still has that same level of addressability. Sort of, I'm curious to hear whether you know either anecdotally or just because you're talking to the clients a lot, whether they're sort of merging their sort of online identity graphs and online identity targeting into their direct mail, or are they still pretty siloed?
So we do have some clients doing that. It does tend to be a little siloed still, unfortunately, but we do offer with our unified identity solution a concept that we call omnichannel remarketing. And we do have some clients doing, that type of, digital retargeting in the offline space, either in direct mail or sometimes they'll go and they'll buy TV based on those sort of signals. And we do see clients doing that and being quite successful. One of the advantages of having a holistic offline and online graph is that you can do true A/B testing, and you can have a holdout group both digitally and offline and actually measure the effectiveness of it, which is pretty interesting and exciting. And we've been able to show when we've done those types of studies that doing those things in concert does have a positive effect. On ROI. So it is something that we think more people should be doing. But mostly what they'll do, you see this, you go to a website, you put something in the cart and then you don't buy it. They'll send you an email. That we see a lot of that. We see less of the direct mail. But we do see that as an area of growth. And if you are able to customize the direct mail, I think that can be really quite effective. I don't know what you guys are doing. Is that how your solution works? Or
yeah, I mean, we certainly do that, but we have some other stuff just coming out of beta that I'll send you a sample of, and I'll value your point of view on that. Are there any clients that you can either name or just at the industry level that you think are doing some really cool stuff using your platform?
Sure. I mean, I can't really talk about individual clients. Unfortunately, most of them do not let us talk about them, which can be frustrating. We have an
anonymized client in a category then.
So we have a couple clients in the financial space that are doing some really interesting things. We have a few retail clients in particular that are doing amazing things with data. They have access to more client, consumer data than just about anybody else. So these big retailers are able to do some really interesting things with their data, and then the data collaboration capabilities there are pretty fantastic. And then we have a couple of big digital platforms that use us to help them with their marketing, and they're also really kind of pushing us into a privacy first direction, which I appreciate. I feel that's the way that we need to go. Sometimes it's hard to prioritize privacy, but when you have privacy and revenue combined together, that's obviously the best, because now I can make the changes that I want to make and justify them from a revenue perspective. So there are a lot of cool things being done out there. I think the new area that I expect to see the most growth in the next year is this combination of contextual, behavioral, and identity. I think that is the area where we'll see the most growth in 2022, just because we know contextual works, we know identity works. Combining them together to have a at scale solution without cookies is going to be pretty critical. And obviously the clean room space is crazy, but I still don't think anyone knows what they want. I haven't talked to a single marketer that actually knew what they wanted from a clean room, other than the question is, well, whose data do you have in it? And that's the only question they have. They don't want to know about the technology or how it works or the encryption method or the types of analytics you can do. All anyone cares is whose data is in there. And so I expect that will change over the next 18 months, and people will actually care about the tech. And I'm looking forward to that.
Well, final question is really about for the marketers that are of sort of medium to larger size and maybe are getting somewhat late to the idea that I need a rich first-party data set. Are there any sort of shortcuts or easy ways to get a pretty, robust business intelligence platform in place so that they have a good snapshot of their customers? And should that be like priority one for them, given the fact that we're losing a lot of the third-party data sources?
So I think this is true for every business. I think that every business that has interactions directly with consumers needs to have some sort of strategy for collecting and storing that data. Because we have that in GDPR in Europe, and we know that that's sort of the future for everybody. And so you're going to have some sort of strategy for collecting the data, describing what you're going to use that data for in a way that consumers can understand and agree to. And then you need a way to keep the context in which it was collected with the data. So that data governance step is probably the most important step that we need to see brands doing. Like, yes, once you have that, you stick BI on top of it and it's gold, right? But the mistake that people make is they set up the BI without the fundamental infrastructure in place to actually have the governance, and then it gets ripped out from under them because they built their BI on a shaky platform that didn't have what it needed to be successful for the next 3 to 5 years. And so we would start with make sure you know what data you have, make sure you have good policies, like a data retention policy. Most brands don't have one. And so that means that data is kept forever. And maybe that's okay. But maybe it's not. And, we see things with, the CCPA, obviously that changed the game in California. And now we have a bunch of other state laws coming into effect. All of them have slightly different definitions of everything, all kind of based on GDPR. And we're just going to have this like weird, state by state thing until the federal government gets their act together, which, given the politics in this country, I don't see happening anytime soon. So you just need to have that stable foundation. And then once you have the stable foundation, the BI is easy. But if you go BI first, you're going to be disappointed in the long run.
That's great advice. Thanks, Stephen. I appreciate you joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. This was great.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in the Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.